You're listening to the Technology for Mindfulness podcast, episode 39, hosted by me, Robert Plotkin. Today I'm going to be speaking with Kelli Reese, a former CEO turned life coach who's on a mission to motivate, empower, and inspire courageous women to navigate resistance and uncertainty. Kelli is an author and certified leadership coach who specializes in navigating the unknown abyss that can come with career and relationship transitions. You can find out more about Kelli at KelliReese.com. That's KelliReese.com. We're extremely pleased to welcome Kelli Reese to the Technology for Mindfulness podcast. In the upcoming interview with Kelli Reese, you'll hear Kelli talk about how when she gets distracted or sucked into use of technology, she often will step away from her desk, go lay down in a hammock, take a walk, or do something else to break her out of that loop. I'd like to today, for our tip, to expand on this just slightly and suggest that you pick an activity in advance that you're going to decide to engage in when you notice that you're getting sucked into use of social media, distracted by technology, feeling stressed out by technology, or when you notice that you're just doing anything with technology that doesn't feel good or that you'd rather not be doing. When I suggest that you pick this in advance, it's so that you don't leave it up to yourself in that moment when you're feeling out of balance to decide what action you're going to take. Because in that moment, at least I found, I am less likely to make the best decision about what to do. So if I wake up in the morning instead and say, when I notice today that I am compulsively checking email, I will stand up and take a walk for a minute, or move away from my desk at least and close my eyes. And I will focus in the morning on setting my intention to take that action so that when the time comes, 5 hours later, let's say, and I notice that I'm sucked into email, I will already have decided what action I'm going to take, and I can just stand up and walk away from my desk for a minute. And the action you decide on can be anything. The important thing for this tip is that you pick the action in advance. And I would suggest that it involve moving your body and moving away from the technology in some way to engage in an action that doesn't involve using technology. But what it is can be anything you decide. I hope that you find it helpful. Give it a shot, see how it works, and let us know. And I hope you enjoy the upcoming interview with Kelli Reese. Hi, Kelli, and welcome to the Technology for Mindfulness podcast.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for having me.
I would like to start off with something that I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in learning about from your personal and professional experience, which is that you left the job as a CEO to move to the middle of the jungle and live and work from there. I wonder if you could start with the why of that, and then tell people a little bit about the how you make it work personally and from the technology perspective. And how you stay focused and productive, and maybe some of the challenges that you deal with, so that people can relate it to their own experience, even if they're not literally in the jungle.
Okay. Yeah, some people are in their own jungle, concrete jungle, right. But this is literally the jungle. I live in Tulum, Mexico, which for geographically challenged is on the Yucatan Peninsula. So I live on the Caribbean. It's kind of across from Cuba, about 90 minutes south of Cancun. And yes, I walked away from a 6-figure job. At the time, I didn't know I was going to move to Tulum. About 6 weeks after I left the job, a friend contacted me and said, do you want to go to Tulum? And I said, yes. And I didn't know where Tulum was. So I figured I better find out where I'm going. And so we went. A few weeks later, we ended up going to Tulum, and I came here for 8 days. And as I was leaving, if I could have convinced them to dump me, we were with a couple other friends, to dump me on the side of the highway and just leave me here, I would have. The feeling with the calling to be here was that strong.
What was it? What can you put into words about what that pull was?
It's Tulum is a very spiritual place. The energy here it's a very feminine energy, but it's also the type of energy that, and I talk about this a lot. It's the type of energy that puts all of your stuff right in your face and requires you to grow. And I loved that energy because I'm all about growth, and I really love pushing myself to learn more about how I function, what's going on in my body, my brain. And it really, some people move here and, they're drawn here, and then it's just like, oh my God, I can't stay here, because the energy of that constant energy of allowing you to see yourself in a different way. And it's very prevalent. And I always say Tulum provides, but it doesn't always provide exactly what you think it will. It's the kind of place where you think, I'm going to manifest a place to live in the jungle. And then like 3 days later, the place comes up for you. It's that kind of energy. And you just think to yourself, oh, I'm thinking about this. And then a day later, an hour later, there it is. It's an incredible energy to live in, but it's also, it's kind of like riding the wave and not controlling everything, just being available to go through the process of what it's providing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I didn't make the same kind of move as you, but we moved to a fairly rural area in Massachusetts a few years ago. We're still pretty close to cities and that kind of thing, but our closest neighbor is a half a mile from us. It does present that experience of being with yourself. Having grown up and lived most of my life in cities, then moving here, it made me realize in a city, it's very easy to avoid yourself if you want to. Yeah. Or it's actually the default is to avoid having to confront and just be present with yourself. And that's the opposite here. It's been a very interesting experience. I don't know if that's part of what you're talking about.
Yeah, in a sense it is. The city's in your face in a different way. Living in a foreign country for me there's been challenges. You asked about challenges. For sure, Mexico in general has challenges, just in it's a third world country. There's a lot of poverty here. And while Tulum recycles, overall, there's just things growing up in California that I don't experience as readily as I did living in the U.S. My access to food is different. I have an incredible support system here. There's actually a lot of single women traveling through Tulum and living here. So I have an incredible support network. But most of them are expats, people who've come from somewhere else. And Tulum is growing really quickly. So the energy is shifting and changing, which is hard to see because that means that it's growing in a way that it's not sustainable, in my opinion, because there's a lot of the jungle that's being taken down in order to put up shishi boutique hotels, essentially.
Wow. And you are running your business. You haven't moved there to retire or to stop working. Can you talk about some of the challenges and maybe benefits of that and how it's different for you, and maybe any lessons you think other people who aren't living in the jungle could learn from it or apply into their own lives?
Yeah, sure. I work online and I do life coaching and readings for people. And so people find me through very interesting ways. I don't do a lot of marketing or advertising, but people will find me, they will have a dream about the Akashic records, because that's what I do, is I do readings of the Akashic records, and then they'll open Instagram, and my profile will be there, and it says Akashic records, and then they'll contact me and say, I had a dream last night about the Akashic records. I've never heard of this. And so it's interesting for me to see how people find me, because I feel more disconnected than I ever have living in the jungle. And I have a strong meditation practice, so I feel more connected to myself, but less connected to the rest of everyone else. So it's interesting how people find me, and I love it now. It's one of the first questions I ask people if they haven't sent me a message in that way. And so for me, it's just I find myself with this feeling that the internet has connected me in ways I never thought possible, so that I can go anywhere that I want. I actually spend time, I spend a few months here in Tulum, and then I travel, which I love. And so it's given me an opportunity to feel more free than I ever have in my life. I'm not tied to a desk anywhere. My desk is wherever if I want to go and take my computer down to the beach, I can work from there. The internet is here, and that is one of the factors I have to take into account when I'm traveling as well, is my internet connection, just because that's how I meet with clients. But I have found that traveling, and even in Mexico, I have better internet than I had when I was living in the Redwood Forest back in Northern California, which seems a little crazy to me, but it's true.
I wonder what that experience is like. Let's say the difference between what it's like to be working from your home in the jungle on the internet, interacting with people, versus traveling around and doing it. I don't know if there's a certain sense of feeling ungrounded when you're traveling, or do you have ways to keep yourself grounded, while working online and traveling around into such different environments?
Yes, I love traveling, so that works in my favor. I'm the kind of person that I love exploring internally and externally, so it goes really well together. But I definitely take things with me when I travel that help me feel as if I'm home. So I have the same tea that I always drink out of the same cup. I always bring that with me. I bring crystals and incense, and then I meditate every single day. And that's really what keeps me grounded is my meditation practice. No matter what, if I'm sitting anywhere in a hotel room, if I've found a rooftop or wherever I am, sometimes I'm in the yoga room in San Francisco airport, even for 10 minutes, just grabbing. I was flying through there on Sunday, and I went and just popped into the yoga room for 10 minutes. That makes a huge difference for centering me. And I use, there's a couple of meditation apps I use too. And so the familiarity of those voices that are on those apps and the background music, and I use white noise and binaural beats. So all those things really help to keep me centered because they're familiar. I don't change things up.
Yeah, so there's a certain aspect of your experience that you're keeping constant and regular while your external environment is changing so much.
Yeah, I burn the same incense. I set up my crystals when I go into hotel rooms. So for me, those are the things that really keep me grounded when I'm traveling, because I want to travel. I love traveling. I love getting out and seeing things. And part of me is a little afraid to travel by myself. So that's how I know, I'm meant to do this. Kind of gauge my path on the level of fear and if it's barf worthy or not. If I feel like, this is kind of making me feel sick, then I really think, I should probably pay attention to this. So I'm going to keep going forward.
And I wonder what other suggestions you might have, if any, for other people who are, I know the term digital nomad is out there now. There may not be a lot of people who have as diverse an experience as you traveling from place to place, but what would you suggest to people there are many of us now who find ourselves traveling a lot, working online from different places, and how else to stay grounded, centered, focused while just moving so much, and while the pace of change and demands on us are so high.
I definitely feel that starting the day getting centered will carry you throughout your day. But even in those moments where if I'm sitting in an airplane seat, I will close my eyes and just take those few minutes to go internal and check in to my breath. I use my breath a lot, just in my daily life. If I'm starting to feel uneasy, or because I pick up on everything, just energetically, I feel a lot. So when I travel, which is why home is really important to me, like where I stay and where I put down, my computer for a month. It has to feel right to me. I'm the person who will pick up and leave and go to two different places to make sure that I feel right in a space. And if you don't feel good where you are, that's huge. And don't be afraid to, I rented this Airbnb, but it just isn't right. Something's wrong, then move. Be the woman who makes or the man who makes those decisions. And mostly men are easier to make those decisions, I think. But some women are like, well, I made the commitment. And the people that I work with, it's like, no, be the woman who decides this is not right. I'm going to move. And that's what I had to realize too, is that I am that woman. It's okay to say this is not right and find the place that is.
Yeah, and the first step is just even becoming aware yourself that it's not right, which I think many of us might mindlessly feel agitated or uncomfortable, and yet not have a full awareness of what's behind it or causing it.
Yeah, and because of my practices, because of my meditation practice, because I'm so connected, I know when something feels out of alignment for me, and that's when I feel that shift. That's when I check in and I ask myself, is this coming from someone else? Is this coming from where I am? Is this coming from me? What is this? And so I can get clear on what it is, and then make choices based on what I'm feeling and the information that I'm getting.
I know that one of the things you specialize in and advise people on is various kinds of transitions, whether it be career transitions or relationship transitions. I think the travel we talked about is maybe a smaller scale type of transition that people might engage in frequently. But, in our lives today, we tend to have, I think, more of these bigger life transitions more frequently than people did in the past. People change entire careers more frequently than before. Could you talk a little bit to people about, the work that you do on transitions and how you help people through them?
Yes, I would love to. So in my books, I write about a place I call the void, and that is the place between what was and what will be. So it's that, one door has closed and another one has yet to open. And in between is this dark abyss that, people are afraid to step into it because it's the unknown and you have no idea what's going to happen out there. So I call that place the void. And the thing that people don't realize is that when you're in indecision, when you're standing at the, doorway, the precipice, and thinking, is this the right job? Am I in the right relationship? Should I move? You're questioning all these things. Am I happy? You're actually in the indecision. You're in the void. So my work with people is you're already there. So move forward so you can see why you're asking these questions. And it's normal to ask questions randomly here and there, like, oh, is this the right place? But when they're pounding questions that are repeating over and over and over again, there's a reason why. I call them the inconvenient questions because we don't often want to answer them. Because we're afraid of what the answer is going to be. Like, what are we going to find on the other side? When I work with people on their relationships, they go to the end, and what their mind is telling them is going to happen if they step into the void and answer some of the questions is, oh, it's the worst possible scenario. And I remind them that I have many clients who actually end up staying in their relationships, and their relationships improve beyond anything they could have ever imagined. But they had to move forward and step into the void and ask themselves these questions and answer them in a way that they're not listening to their mind, but they're actually listening to their heart and soul, because they're asking the questions for a reason.
When people are in that void and are in what you called indecision, I would suspect that a big part of what keeps them back is fear. Maybe some of it is not knowing what questions to ask, which is more of an intellectual problem than an emotional one. Could you talk a little bit about what is it that keeps people there or holds them back, and how do you help people, both emotionally and logically, get through and move forward past that place of indecision?
Yes, you're 100% right. It's fear. 99.9% of the time, fear is what's stopping people from moving forward. And it's fear of the unknown. They just don't know what's out there. They don't realize that once you step forward and begin to listen to where it is you're being guided, it's like a light comes on in that hallway in the void. And the longer you stay in the indecision, the more painful it can be. And I know this because I'm an expert in the void, because I've been there so many times. I did not do it very well many years. I white knuckled it through. It's like, and everything was okay on the other side, but it doesn't have to be this torturous place that we go through in order to get to the other side. Everything we want's on the other side of fear, but in the void. And it's like, and people are just paralyzed at times to step forward. And I understand it so well, because it's so real. And, your mind is telling you every possible thing that will go wrong, every possible outcome that is not positive. And it's hard to decipher what's real between your mind and trust in what you can't see, because your mind wants you to believe that it knows, and it doesn't know. But with you staying in the indecision, that's where the mind and the ego has an identity. When we get out in the unknown, it has less power over us, because we are living more in alignment with what's happening rather than controlling everything. It's kind of like, oh, you don't have to have everything figured out. That's what I've learned, which is really freeing and extremely hard to trust and live in. It takes a lot of patience. And so, yeah, sometimes people don't know the questions. They just have this feeling of heaviness. Their heart feels heavy, or they just know that there's got to be something more than where they are. It's like, oh, there has to be more than this. Like sometimes it's just that. They're not asking specific questions, but they certainly feel that this isn't how it's meant to be. And so that's what can lead to asking more questions. When I left my job, so many incredible things happened. I went to Tulum, and then I came back. I opened another business. I started my coaching business. I wrote my book, and all these incredible things were happening. And halfway through writing my first book, I was still feeling that heavy feeling. And so what I did was I sat in meditation and just asked, I tapped in and just said, what is this? And instantly I heard relationship. I was like, oh. And I knew it was right. And I knew I had to look at it, but I just didn't. I was like, no, everything is so great. But I wanted to enjoy everything. I wanted to feel free in all of the amazing stuff that was happening. But there was that heavy underlying tone to everything. And so I had to follow what that was. And for me, that led to the breakup of my marriage, which hasn't been this terrible thing that my mind wants to tell me it was. We have a great relationship. We're still really good friends. We vacation with all of our friends together, and it didn't have to be the typical, what people see as a dissolution of a relationship or a marriage. But yeah, if you're feeling that heaviness, that's the beginning of the questions. And so we have the power to affect change in our lives as much as we have the power to choose different paths. And you can choose something that isn't the negative path. It takes two for sure. I have an incredible ex-partner, ex-husband who is willing, and that's important. I realize how lucky I am and fortunate I am, but I have clients who stay with their partners, and their relationships, they change because the person that I'm working with has changed. You can't change another person. There's no way. It just doesn't work like that. You can only change yourself and how you think about things and how you show up. And so that's what I really work on people with. The Relationship Roadmap is my second book. And really the relationship, I talk all about my own relationship, and I relate it back to how people can move through the process of putting the focus on themselves. And so the relationship roadmap is really the relationship with yourself. And I used to hear people say the relationship with yourself is the most important relationship. And I would want to throw up. I just was like, oh. One, I didn't understand what they were talking about. Then I was like, oh, they're full of it. They have no idea what they're talking about. And until I learned, until I understood that, oh my gosh, it is so true. And until I could really show up for myself, I had a really hard time showing up for anything else, even relationships.
It's interesting. Well, one is clear relationship to mindfulness practice, in which we draw our attention inward to ourselves. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the importance of focusing on yourself in a relationship. I mean, many people may already be familiar with this or do it, but I think if you ask a lot of people, tell you about what's wrong in their relationship, talk about problems, probably 9 out of 10 will focus on the other person and what's wrong with them.
Yes.
It's not as common for people to say, oh, here's all the things that are wrong with the relationship, and start talking about what they're doing to contribute to the problems. So, can you talk about why this is true and why it's helpful, even though it might be a bit counterintuitive to people or not what they do naturally?
Yes, I can definitely talk about that. I had all the reasons why things were not feeling great in the relationship, and a lot of them had to do with what was wrong with my husband. So I do know that very well. And because of my mindfulness practice, because of my willingness to grow on my spiritual path and grow as a human here, living here, on this planet, I really took the time to focus the energy back on myself. And that's when I realized, oh, I have a choice here. I could see all those things that were going on with him. And lo and behold, they were actually things that were there when we met, and I just thought, oh, those will change. They'll get better. I'll get used to it. All these things that you tell yourself because you love the person, and the energy that my husband and I had, it was great. It's why we're still friends today, because we laugh a lot. We have a great time, but I had to find within myself, this list of other things, does it matter? Is it, a deal breaker kind of thing? And for me, it was. And we had conversations about here's what I need. And, he even said, I'm fearful that I can't provide that for you. And I said to him, I write about this in the book too. And I said to him, well, maybe that's the kind of fear you're supposed to push through, me being the change person. And he said, maybe, but I just, I'm not on a spiritual path. I'm not going to meditate with you. I'm not going to do yoga. And it was I didn't need him to necessarily do those actual practices with me, but I did want us to feel like we were growing on a path together, and it felt like we were growing apart. The further that I got on my own spiritual path and my path of mindfulness, the more I started to realize what mattered to me and what was important to me. And I hadn't really given myself the opportunity to listen to my needs or what it was that I wanted in a relationship. And that was even the relationship with myself. I never imagined when I walked away from my job that I'd be living alone in Mexico, deep in the jungle. And what I've discovered from that is that I don't necessarily need a relationship. It'd be wonderful to have someone in my life who I was growing with, but the relationship with myself is so strong that I'm extremely happy and grounded, and I love my life. And it's something for me that I never allowed myself to experience because I was scared. I was scared to be on my own, 20 years ago. And so when I met my husband, he checked a lot of the boxes. We have this list that many of us create, the man we want to attract, or the woman we want to attract and call in. And, when I looked back at that list, because I still had it, it was like, I wasn't the same person who wrote that list 17 years ago. And that list doesn't get modified. You don't update it. And so it doesn't grow with you. But hopefully your partner is growing with you, and that wasn't happening.
But it sounds like, you did, through meditation and perhaps other ways of exploring yourself, that you did update the list. It is possible, even though many people don't do it, or they, unconsciously maintain the same list over time, even while they're changing. And you're pointing out that it is possible to keep up. I know we're calling it a list, a bit tongue in cheek, which maybe it's yes. Oversimplified. But, if you don't pay attention to yourself and focus on that, you probably won't ever be aware of that your own list has changed.
Yes. And I looked for a man, the other person in my life, no matter if I was in my teens, 20s, 30s, it didn't matter. I got married in my early 30s. I looked for a person to fill holes in me that I thought I never knew that I was meant to fill those holes, And so I constantly looked outside of myself for those things that I felt were missing within me. And it was never anyone's responsibility to fill those pockets of missing pieces for me. And it's impossible, actually. It's not anyone else's responsibility to do that. And so once I started filling those spaces, it was like, oh, wait a minute. And so, that's what I gained through my mindfulness practice, and through just getting more in touch with who I am and what my desires are and what I wanted. It's what prompted me. It's what gave me the permission for myself to say, you don't have to live in the US. You can go where it's warm, and you can live on the Caribbean and live in Mexico. I love Mexico. I've been traveling this country for 20 plus years. With the idea that I was going to find a place in Mexico that I could put down some roots and live. And so when I came to Tulum, I was like, oh, I could live there, But none of that would have happened if I hadn't been in touch with what I wanted and given myself permission to follow my heart, basically.
Yeah, and recognize who you were at that time, which, the person from 20 years ago might not have wanted to or been open to living there.
Right.
I wonder if you could say a little bit more, and I don't want you to give away everything that's in your upcoming book, but, this way of being in a relationship, in which it sounds like you are focused on very much understanding yourself, and not, as you said, looking to someone else to fill holes or gaps in who you are. In this other, let's call it self-aware, I don't know if you have a term for this, self-focused way of being, then what is the role of relationship with others? And I'll just step back and say, I know there's somewhat of an ongoing conversation about mindfulness in the West. I've heard some people be critical of it, saying that it can have the tendency of causing people to become self-absorbed or narcissistic if they take it too far, in a sense, by focusing so much on themselves, that it can detract from a healthy way of relating to other people. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I understand the risk of it if mindfulness is either taught or practiced or received in a certain way. I wonder if you can speak to that, particularly as it relates to relationships.
Yes. And there's a lot of different meditation practices. So There's people learning all different forms of meditation and practicing different forms. For me, I just do what feels good. So the apps I use, I enjoy the people who are doing the presentations on the apps. And so, and there's a lot of questioning spirituality in general, especially in the US. You can find anything on the internet to back what it is your mind is telling you, which I've noticed. And so you have to go with what feels right to you. So I'll start with that. What I really write about is showing up as your whole self. And that means that you're not looking to someone else to provide something for you that it's not their responsibility to provide. So for me, a relationship is the relationship I want to have is about expansion and growth and growing together on a spiritual path. That's not everybody's idea of the ideal relationship that they want. But I've been on this path for 20 plus years, and it's something that's really important to me. And I don't see that changing. And I'm open to what comes. And I know that it's probably not going to look exactly as I plan. So I try not to plan anything. I'm just in this moment today, in this conversation, and I'm happy today. It doesn't mean I don't get upset or bad things don't happen. It's just that I don't stay in like worry or concern or any of those, of that energy for very long. I pivot pretty easily because for me, even in the challenging stuff, I can always find a silver lining. Like I always say, I can find a silver lining in a pile of poop. Like it's just, I've been that. I'm pretty optimistic about stuff, but I'm also realistic. Things are great. So, but things happen. Your car breaks down, you get a flat tire, all those kind of things. But I try not to let those things become negative things. It's like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to meet this person who's coming to help me with this tire, whatever. But for me, relationship is really about growing as a person. And you can do that really well in relationships because a lot of times stuff's coming up for you as an individual. And we all come to relationships with wounds, and a lot of them have nothing to do with the person you're with. And so relationships are somewhat about healing, but also helping me flourish and grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wonder if we can turn to a somewhat different topic, but somewhat related. You talked about relationship to yourself, relationship to people, including a spouse. Maybe we can talk a little bit about relation to technology, which can often feel like a living thing in our lives. And you have an interesting life experience in that you're in the jungle, but you're also very connected to technology. We're using it right now, and our listeners may not know we've had a few technological glitches in the conversation. It always keeps things interesting. I wonder if you can talk about how you've related to technology and continue to, how you deal with challenges of it in your business, and then how you help use it to maybe help you be more connected with people, and then how you integrate the times in your life, which must be many given where you're living, when you're not directly using technology, how you integrate that into your life.
Sure. So I am online almost every day. I don't work Friday through Sunday, and I try really hard not to check in. But sometimes I do. And sometimes clients are, they need a little conversation, and that's totally fine. And I try to, I say try to, I try to have a cutoff time for social media in the evening, 7:30 or 8. And I have found that at times I feel addicted to social media and to the connection that I didn't have with my friends and my family, and just this amount of information that's coming in at all times. I've noticed that when my phone beeps or, you have little notification things, I turn off as many notifications as I can. And I leave my phone on silent almost all day. So I don't have a great cell phone coverage, and I'm not a phone talker, so I don't get a lot of phone calls, but I text like a crazy woman. And so I have to pull myself away through noticing that it's becoming too much. Um, and and that is something that I work on daily, because I find that I can be pulled away and distracted very easily. And I even put an app through Chrome on my desktop that helps you with Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that on there for a while. And then I said, you know what, I can do this on my own.
Yeah.
And so I did. And I'm hardly on Facebook on my computer at all. I really I try to do blocks of time where I focus on whatever project it is I'm working on, and try to see that through for a solid amount of time, without getting distracted. But yeah, my focus can get pulled fairly easily. And so what I do is, sometimes if I find myself getting my focus pulled, I will go out and take a walk, or I'll go out I have a porch swing, not necessarily a porch, but I have a swing. Um, and so I'll go and I'll just sit there, or I'll take a few minutes and I'll climb in the hammock and just swing back and forth. I'll get my body moving and get out from in front of the screen, because I spend so much time there. Uh, I've noticed too my body posture. And so I will check in with my body as well and make sure that, that forward movement, that hunching forward, that I'm drawing my shoulders back and down. And it takes a lot of awareness, because I can get sucked in pretty easily, and I can stay there for hours.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I hear people ask, how can I get more focused or less distracted? Of course, it's a good goal. But one thing I hear you saying is that even if you're easily distracted, if you can notice that you've been distracted,
Yes.
that can be a big help. Maybe more so than trying to work on being less easily distractible. That may or may not be something you can change about yourself,
Right.
but you can change the ability to notice it when it occurs and then act on that.
Yeah, you were talking about the difference between living in a rural country and the city. It's, I didn't move to Mexico to live outside of Tulum in the deep jungle, so that I could be distracted by, beeping phones and
Right.
being super stimulated by social media and texts and all the things that are happening in our daily lives. And a lot of times we're desensitized to the amount of stimulation that's coming through our phones and through the computer. And so I've really had to become more aware of how much time I'm spending. And like right now, I limit when my client calls are to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I actually, I won't take more than 2 or 3 calls a day, so that I get off the computer and I have an hour between calls. And so I set up my schedule to provide time for myself to disconnect.
Yes. Yeah, it's really great suggestion. I think a lot of people maybe have that fear of what will happen if they try to exercise that kind of control over their schedule, or think that they can't do it. I do it myself, and I remember when I first started doing this. I work as a lawyer. I have clients. I remember having all of these fears. Clients will fire me. They'll be upset. They won't stand for it, and then realized actually 99% of the time, it's not an issue for me to say I'm only available at these times. I don't think most people actually think anything of it.
No,
It was me and my own fear,
yes.
that was stopping me, not actual reality.
Yes. Yeah. And we have information overload. I mean, I'm fortunate here. I don't have a television. I rarely watch TV these days. And I don't have the phone ringing, like I said. And but I still notice the distractions. It makes it easier for me to notice because some people I work with have the TV on in the background, and it's on
Right.
CNN or news, and it's like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
let's turn that off to music, and I'll play soft music in the background, which helps me. I burn candles, but technology is incredible because it allows me to have the life that I have. So I'm grateful for it. I don't take it for granted, but I also know that I have a limit.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just curious for our listeners. I use LeechBlock, which is available as a plugin for all the web browsers. It basically lets you tell it, I only want to be able to spend 15 minutes during work hours on the following sites. And it's very configurable in that way. I have YouTube in there. For me, it's also news, a lot of news sites I put in there. And I think I've got it set up for only 15 minutes of that time during my business hours. And the other thing, which it's a bit of an embarrassing admission, but I've set it up to be very difficult to disable. And it has that ability in it where you have to type some, 60 character randomly generated string of characters, I think, to turn it off. So if you get that temptation to turn it off, it introduces a lot of friction. So the thinking is by the time, halfway through typing that that string of characters, I would be likely to notice that I'm doing something that's, not what I really want to do. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of technology today. It's specifically designed to eliminate any friction between our initial impulse and the ability to act on it.
Yeah.
Which is very powerful, but makes it all the more important to do what you're talking about, which is develop through meditation and maybe other practices, that ability to notice what you're doing. Because all of us are susceptible to acting in ways that may not be what we want to do. If our sole focus is on trying to stop ourselves from doing that in the first place, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
If we can at least notice that we've done it and get better at noticing maybe more frequently or more quickly, that's a strategy that may be more likely to succeed. I wonder if you can let people know if they want to learn more about you, your work, coaching people on relationships and transitions and business. Where can they find you, and where can they get in touch with you and learn more about you?
People can reach me on my website is a great place. It's Kelli Reese, kellywithani.com. And that's where they can find my books and find out about readings and working with me. And then I have an Instagram account that is very engaging. Lots of engaged people I contact. I chat with people all the time on Instagram, and I love Instagram. I prefer that over Facebook because I get sucked into Facebook pretty easily. So that's Kelli.Reese is the account there. So they can follow me on Facebook, and that's how we can communicate, even direct message me there if interested.
Well, fantastic. Thanks so much for the really wide-ranging discussion about working remotely, traveling, life, career, personal relationship transitions. I really enjoyed the conversation, Kelli. Thanks for being on the Technology for Mindfulness podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for this Technology for Mindfulness podcast with me, Robert Plotkin, and today's guest, Kelli Reese, an author, certified leadership coach, and former CEO, now turned practical psychic, who helps people to navigate resistance and uncertainty in their lives. You can find out more about Kelli at her website, kellireese.com. That's KelliReese.com. If you liked today's episode, please leave us a review on iTunes and share the episode with your friends. Those and all other links are in the show notes. And check out our blog at technologyformindfulness.com for information and tips about science, technology, and mindfulness. And sign up for our online Tap Into Mindfulness course for helping you to take control of your smartphone at bit.ly/tapintomindfulness. I'm Robert Plotkin, and I'll join you next time on the Technology for Mindfulness podcast with Patricia Lowen, a coach, healer, and feng shui expert. We'll talk about how to detox your business, unstick your beliefs, and declutter your busy mind.